historical books record the Israelites' entrance and expulsion from the Promised Land. In many ways, the book of Joshua concludes the Pentateuch when the Israelites conquer the inhabitants of Canaan and divide the land among the tribes of Jacob. The covenant renewals in Deuteronomy and Joshua inform the reader that Israel attains a great military victory, but this victory is incomplete. The book of Judges chronicles the hardships associated with this incomplete conquest in Joshua. Through the stories of 12 judges, 6 major and 6 minor, the narrative history captures the failures of the covenant from the death of Joshua to the life of Samuel. At the heart of this failure was the belief that God was no longer king over Israel. As a result, the people began to worship other gods. Thus, the period of the Judges symbolizes a sacral confederation of 12 tribes of Israel centered loosely around the worship of God and the effects of lifestyle of a religious syncretism. In other words, there was no central government, no capital city, no administrative machinery or bureaucracy, and the city of Shiloh was the location of the Ark of the Covenant. The crux of the theological message in Judges is summarized in the phrase, "Every man did what was right in his own eyes." After the closing of the Judges' cycles, the narrator incorporates this new theological paradigm which counters the words of Joshua at Shechem when he says, "As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord." That the Israelites have no king and that every person does what's right in his own eyes augments the downward spiraling spiritual and civil setting in Israel during the period of the Judges. With the establishment of the monarchy in 1 and 2 Samuel, a new social and political and religious paradigm is introduced. Israel is governed no longer by the mighty hand of God, but by a human agent, the king. Thus, the books of 1 and 2 Samuel introduce the drastic shift from a theocracy to a monarchy. Theoretically speaking, the king of Israel is to be committed to the laws of God. However, the shortcomings of the kingship, both in the united and divided monarchies, are chronicled in the literary history of the Samuel and Kings corpora. The shift between theocracy to monarchy is introduced first in the prophetic imagery in Deuteronomy 17 and becomes a reality in 1 Samuel 8. However, the promise of the kingship is given earlier in Israel's history. It is at this point in Israel's history that the relationship between God and Israel becomes fractured. Between Israel and its nation and... Loved it.
Okay, you want to start over with the last sentence?
Yes.
Okay.
With between. Okay.
3, 2.
Between the genesis and the destruction of the monarchy, the biblical writers describe a meticulous detail of how the people of Israel lose their identity, their freedom, and their faith. After the kingdom was divided into 2 nations, Judah in the south and northern Israel in the north, the plight of the Israelites was bleak. In northern Israel, the sins of the first king, Jeroboam, continued to cast a shadow over the kingship. All of the kings, 19 in total, were considered evil. The throne was a survival of the fittest with no hereditary link to the kings of Saul and David. In Judah, the southern kingdom, the outlook was somewhat better than her sister in the north. Of the 20 kings, 8 were considered godly. Unfortunately, the godly kings could not offset the lasting effects of the evil kings. Unlike the north, the kings of the south were hereditary, maintaining a link to the Davidic dynasty. Over the next 400 years in Israel's history, the people of Israel will be subjugated to the foreign nations of Assyria, Babylon, and Persia. The freedom of the people will be lost in 722 BC in the north and 587 BC in the south. According to the Old Testament scholar John Bright, the 2 states, north and south, though superficially similar, were in important respects quite different. Judah, smaller and poorer, had the more homogeneous... Stop right there. It jumped again on me. All right. It's only one paragraph left.
3, 2.
Had a more homogeneous population and relative geographical isolation. Israel was larger and wealthier, and though near to the center of the old tribal system, contained a larger Canaanite population and was by accident of geography more exposed to the outside influences, particularly that of the Assyrians. After the divide of the monarchy, the 2 nations experienced sporadic sectional warfare. No conclusion was ever made. In sum, politically, spiritually, and financially, the 2 nations of Israel began to decline after the division of the united monarchy.